Welcome to Night Whisper. Night Whisper brings you the darkest tales from the shadows. Join our community. Subscribe, leave a like, and prepare yourself for stories that will haunt your dreams. Listen, you probably won't believe what I'm about to tell you, but I promise you, every word that comes out of my mouth is the truth. My name is Ethan ROURKE. I'm 23 years old, and I work the night shift at Hargrove Market, located at the intersection of Ashland and 5th Street. You've probably driven past it 100 times. It's that old brick building with the faded green awning, the one that looks like it hasn't been updated since the Nixon administration. The parking lot's always half empty, even during rush hour. There's a reason for that. I started working here about 6 months ago. Needed the money for college, and Mrs. Hargrove was the only person in town willing to hire someone with my non-existent work experience. The pay was decent, suspiciously decent actually, and she didn't ask too many questions during the interview, just looked me up and down with those sharp gray eyes of hers and said, "You look like you can handle the unusual. Start Monday." Should have been my first warning sign. The market itself is exactly what you'd expect from a place built in 1933. Narrow aisles, flickering fluorescent lights that buzz like angry wasps. Those old-style tile floors that are permanently stained no matter how much you mop them. We've still got manual price guns, metal shopping carts that screech when you push them, and a meat department that smells like rust, and something else I can't quite identify. Mrs. Hargrove refuses to modernize. "This market has character," she always says. "Character built over 90 years of serving this community." What she doesn't mention is what the market was built on. My first night was pretty standard. Stocked shelves, helped the occasional customer, learned how to use the ancient cash register that looked like it belonged in a museum. The other night shift worker, this guy named Marcus Rivera, showed me the ropes. He was quiet, jumpy, kept looking over his shoulder every few minutes. "You ever see anything weird here?" I asked him around midnight, mostly making conversation. He stopped mid-scan on a can of beans and just stared at me. Define weird. "I don't know, man. Just weird." Marcus set the can down carefully. "Listen, Ethan. This place, it's got rules. Unwritten rules. You follow them, you'll be fine. Probably. Probably. Rule 1. Never go into the walk-in freezer alone after 2 a.m. Rule 2. If you hear someone calling your name and nobody's there, don't answer. Rule 3. The basement door stays locked, always. Mrs. Hargrove has the only key, and even she won't go down there anymore." I laughed. Thought he was messing with the new guy. "Come on, man. You trying to scare me?" Marcus didn't laugh. "Just remember what I said, and if you see Clive, he's the old guy who works in the stockroom. Listen to him. He knows more about this place than anyone." 3 hours later, Marcus quit. Just walked out in the middle of his shift, left his name tag on the break room table, and never came back. I found out later he moved 2 states away. Wouldn't even drive past the market to pick up his final paycheck. Mrs. Hargrove had to mail it to him. That was warning sign number 2. I met Clive during my second week. He's been working at Hargrove Market for 43 years, longer than I've been alive. Tall, thin as a rail, with these deep-set eyes that have seen way too much. He moves through the stockroom like a ghost, always knows exactly where everything is, never makes a sound, unless he wants to. "You're the new night worker," he said, appearing behind me so suddenly I dropped a box of cereal. "Jesus! Yeah. I'm Ethan. I know who you are." He studied me with those unsettling eyes. "Question is, how long are you going to last?" "What's that supposed to mean?" Clive pulled out a small, worn notebook from his shirt pocket. The cover was held together with duct tape, the pages yellowed and covered in cramped handwriting. "I've been keeping track. Every employee who's worked here since 1981, when they started, when they left, and why." He flipped through the pages, showing me entry after entry. Some people lasted years, most lasted weeks. And next to a disturbing number of names, instead of quit or transferred, there was just one word: incident. What kind of incidents? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. The kind Mrs. Hargrove pays a lot of money to keep quiet. Clive closed the notebook. This market, it's hungry, son. Always has been. Built on land that should have been left alone, and now it takes payment in blood every so often. Used to be once a year, regular as clockwork. But lately, he paused, looking around the stockroom like the walls might be listening. Lately, it's getting impatient. I should have walked out right then. Should have tossed my apron in the trash and found literally any other job. But student loans don't pay themselves, and Mrs. Hargrove was offering $17 an hour plus benefits. So I stayed. The first incident I witnessed happened 3 weeks into my employment. It was a Tuesday night, around 1:30 a.m. The store was empty except for me, Clive somewhere in the back, and Mrs. Hargrove doing paperwork in her office. I was restocking the canned goods aisle when I heard it, a wet, sliding sound coming from the meat department. The meat department closes at 9 p.m. Nobody should have been back there. I grabbed a broom handle, not sure what I thought I was going to do with it, and headed toward the sound. The lights in that section flicker worse than anywhere else in the store, casting everything in this stuttering nightmare glow. The sound was coming from behind the meat counter, back where they keep the industrial grinder and bandsaw. The door to that area was supposed to be locked after hours, but it was standing wide open, and I could see something moving in the shadows. "Hello? Store's closed," I called out, my voice cracking. The movement stopped. For about 5 seconds, there was complete silence, except for the buzzing of the lights. Then I heard it. A voice, soft and wet, like someone talking through a mouthful of raw meat. "Help me." Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but some stupid, stubborn part of my brain that still believed there had to be a rational explanation, made me step closer. "Are you hurt? Do you need me to call?" I rounded the corner and saw it. There was a man standing at the meat grinder. At least, it looked like a man at first. He was wearing the white apron and paper hat of a butcher, but his back was to me, and he was hunched over the machine in a way that made my skin crawl. "Sir? You can't be back here." He didn't respond, just kept feeding something into the grinder. I could hear the machine working, the wet grinding sound making my stomach turn. I stepped closer, and that's when I saw what he was grinding. It was his own hand. He was feeding his right arm into the machine, inch by inch, and I could see the meat coming out the other side, red and pulpy and wrong. But he wasn't screaming, wasn't making any sound at all except for that wet whisper, "Help me, help me, help me." I stumbled backward, dropping the broom, and that's when he turned around. His face was gray, the color of old meat that's been left out too long. His eyes were clouded over, white as milk, and his mouth kept moving, forming those same words over and over, even though half his jaw was missing. I ran, sprinted back to the front of the store, crashed through the double doors, and nearly collided with Clive. "There's someone in the meat department," I gasped. He's hurting himself. We need to call." "What'd he look like?" Clive asked calmly. "What? I don't know. He was white apron, paper hat, missing part of his jaw." I stared at him. "How did you—" "That's Thomas Granger. Used to be head butcher here." Clive walked past me toward the meat department like we were discussing the weather. Died in 1987. Got his arm caught in the grinder during a late shift. Bled out before the ambulance arrived. "That's not funny, Clive. There's really someone back there." But when we reached the meat department, it was empty. The grinder was off, cleaned and put away. The door to the back area was locked, just like it was supposed to be. The only evidence that anything had happened was a small puddle of something dark on the floor beneath the grinder. Clive pulled out a mop without comment and cleaned it up. "You're telling me I just saw a ghost," I said flatly. "Ghost, memory, echo. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night." Clive wrung out the mop, and I tried not to look at the color of the water. Point is, you saw Thomas. He shows up every few months, always doing the same thing, trying to fix what happened, I guess. Or warning us. Hard to tell. Warning us about what? Clive looked at me with those haunted eyes. About this place. About what it wants. Thomas was employee number 47 in my book. There have been 36 incidents since then. You know what they all have in common? I shook my head. They all ignored the warnings. Thought they were special, thought they were safe, thought it couldn't happen to them. He started pushing the mop bucket back toward the stockroom. You seem like a smart kid, Ethan. Smart enough to know when you're in over your head. Question is, are you smart enough to get out? I worked the rest of my shift in a daze. Every shadow looked like Thomas. Every sound made me jump. When 6 a.m. finally rolled around and the day shift started arriving, I'd never been so grateful to see other people in my life. I went home and didn't sleep. Just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, bad cafeteria food. There had to be a rational explanation. But deep down, I knew better. 3 days later, I learned about the basement. I was looking for extra trash bags. We'd had a spill in aisle 4 and went through our usual supply, and Clive told me there might be some in the basement storage. He handed me a key ring with about 20 different keys on it, all labeled with pieces of masking tape that had seen better days. Blue tape, brass key, he said. That's the basement door. It's next to the employee bathroom. I thought the basement was off limits. It is, during operating hours. He gave me a look that said, I should probably not ask too many follow-up questions. You'll be fine. Just get the bags and come right back up. Don't go exploring. The basement door was exactly where he said it would be, tucked in a corner of the back hallway that I'd somehow never noticed before. It was made of old, heavy wood, the kind that belongs on a church or a prison, and there were 3 separate locks on it. Only one was actually locked. The blue-taped brass key fit perfectly. The door opened with a groan that sounded almost organic, and a wave of cold air hit me in the face. It smelled like earth and old paper and something sweet that made my teeth ache. The light switch was one of those old pull chain types, and when I yanked it, a single bare bulb flickered to life, illuminating a set of wooden stairs that descended into darkness. I should have called Clive. Should have just said we were out of trash bags and ordered more. But curiosity, and maybe a stupid need to prove I wasn't scared, made me start down those stairs. The temperature dropped with every step. By the time I reached the bottom, I could see my breath. The basement was bigger than I expected, stretching out beyond the range of that single light bulb. I could make out shapes in the darkness, boxes, old shelving, what looked like ancient refrigeration equipment that probably hadn't worked since the Eisenhower administration. The trash bags were right where Clive said they'd be, in a box near the bottom of the stairs. I grabbed them and turned to leave. That's when I saw the wall. The far wall of the basement, barely visible in the weak light, was covered in writing. Not graffiti. This was older, carved directly into the concrete. I couldn't read it from where I stood, but something about it made my skin crawl. I walked closer, trash bags forgotten. The writing covered every inch of the wall, floor to ceiling. It wasn't English, wasn't any language I recognized. The symbols were angular, aggressive, and looking at them too long made my eyes water and my head pound. And there, at the center of the wall, was a name I could read. Hargrove. Except it wasn't carved like the other symbols. It was written in something dark and flaking that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Beneath it, in the same substance, was a date. 1933. I told you not to go exploring. I spun around to find Mrs. Hargrove standing at the bottom of the stairs. I hadn't heard her come down. Hadn't heard anything at all. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but in that moment she seemed to fill the entire basement. Her shadow stretched across the floor in a way that didn't match the light source, and her eyes reflected the bare bulb like an animal's. "I was just getting trash bags," I stammered. "No, you were being curious. Understandable, but dangerous." She walked past me to the wall, running her fingers over the carved symbols with something that looked like affection. My grandfather commissioned this, a ward, or so he believed, a way to contain what he'd awakened. "I don't understand." "No, you don't. And if you're very, very lucky, you never will." She turned to face me. "This market was built on a mass grave, Ethan. Not a proper cemetery, nothing sanctified or blessed. Just a pit where they dumped the bodies of 37 people who died in a factory fire in 1901. Nobody claimed them, nobody mourned them, and for 32 years they waited in the dark." My mouth was too dry to form words. "My grandfather bought this land cheap, built his dream market on top of that pit, never knowing, or perhaps not caring, what he was building on. The market opened on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, the first employee died, slipped in the stockroom, broke her neck. Accident, everyone said. But the accidents kept happening. One every few months, regular as clockwork." She traced one of the symbols on the wall. By 1940, my grandfather had lost 12 employees. The market should have closed, but it was the Depression and people needed jobs, needed food. So he found someone who claimed they could help, a man who said he could bind the dead, make them quiet. This wall was his solution. "Did it work?" Mrs. Hargrove's laugh was bitter. "For a while. The deaths stopped. The market prospered. 3 generations of my family have run this place, and all of us have maintained the ward, strengthened it, added to it. But lately," she trailed off, and in the silence I could hear it, a sound like breathing coming from behind the wall. Deep, slow breaths that made the carved symbols seem to pulse in the dim light. "Lately, the ward is failing. The dead are getting stronger, and they're angry, Ethan, so very angry. They want out. They want to be acknowledged. They want revenge for 90 years of being built on, walked on, forgotten." I backed toward the stairs. "I quit." "No, you don't. Not yet." Her voice was sharp. "You're going to finish your shift. You're going to act like everything is normal. And tomorrow, if you still want to leave, I'll accept your resignation and give you a reference that will get you any job in this city." "And if I just walk out right now?" She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The market doesn't like that. The last person who tried to quit mid-shift made it 3 blocks before he walked into traffic. Witnesses said he looked confused, like he didn't know where he was, like something was guiding him." I felt ice slide down my spine. "One more shift, Ethan. Then you're free. Do we have an agreement?" I nodded because I didn't trust my voice. "Good. Now, take your trash bags and get back to work." I climbed those stairs faster than I've ever moved in my life, and I didn't look back. Not even when I heard Mrs. Hargrove start to chant something in a language that made my ears ring and my nose bleed. The rest of that shift was the longest 6 hours of my life. Every customer looked wrong somehow. Every sound made me jump. And twice, I caught glimpses of something moving in my peripheral vision, something gray and shambling that disappeared when I turned to look directly at it. Clive found me at 5 a.m., sitting behind the checkout counter with a 1,000-yard stare. "She told you, didn't she?" I nodded. "You staying or going?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Should I stay?" Clive was quiet for a long moment. "I've been here 43 years, Ethan. Seen things that would turn your hair white. Lost friends, watched good people die in ways that still give me nightmares. But I stay. You know why?" "Why?" "Because if people like you and me don't stay, if we let this place be staffed by people who don't know the rules, who don't respect what's under us, then the deaths get worse, more frequent, more violent. We're not just employees here. We're wardens, guardians. the only thing standing between 37 pissed-off ghosts and a whole lot of innocent people. He pulled out his notebook and opened it to a blank page at the back. So I'll ask you again, you staying or going? I thought about Marcus, who ran and never looked back. I thought about Thomas Granger, still trapped in the moment of his death, replaying it over and over for 36 years. I thought about Mrs. Hargrove, maintaining a failing ward, trying to contain something that should never have been disturbed in the first place. And I thought about what might happen if I left and someone else took this job. Someone who wouldn't listen to Clive's warnings, someone who'd break the rules and pay for it. I'm staying, I heard myself say. Clive nodded slowly and wrote my name in his book. Then you better learn the rest of the rules, because Thomas isn't the only ghost here. Not by a long shot. And if you're going to survive, you need to know which ones are just echoes and which ones are actively trying to kill you. That conversation happened 3 months ago. Since then, I've learned more about Hargrove Market than any sane person should know. I've seen the woman in aisle 3 who died when a shelf collapsed on her in 1952. She just browses the soup, never causing trouble. I've heard the crying coming from the dairy cooler, a stock boy who got locked in during a blizzard in 1968 and froze to death. He doesn't mean any harm, just wants someone to let him out. But there are others, darker things, the ones that aren't content to just haunt. The man in the loading dock who was crushed by a delivery truck. If you meet his eyes, you'll find yourself walking into traffic within 24 hours. The manager who embezzled from the store in the 80s and hanged herself in the office. She tries to hang others now, and we've had 3 near misses in the past year. And then there's what we call the pit walker. Something that was here before the factory fire, before the mass grave, before any of it. Something that lived in this land long before humans came, and it's furious that we built on top of it. That's what the ward in the basement is really for. Not the 37 dead. They're angry, but they're human, containable. The pit walker is something else entirely. And according to Mrs. Hargrove, the ward is failing. We have maybe 6 months before it breaks completely. Maybe less. So yeah, I work at a haunted grocery store. And unless we find a way to reinforce that ward, unless we can somehow make peace with the dead or contain them permanently, I'm pretty sure this job is going to kill me. But I'll be damned if I'm going to let it kill anyone else. Mira Lancaster, Department Supervisor. My name is Mira Lancaster, and I've been the day shift supervisor at Hargrove Market for 7 years. That makes me either the bravest or the stupidest person in this entire town, depending on who you ask. I started here fresh out of college with a business degree and dreams of managing a major retail chain. Hargrove Market was supposed to be a stepping stone, a place to get some management experience before moving on to bigger and better things. That was 7 years ago. I'm still here, not because I can't leave. I've had offers, good ones, but because after you work here long enough, you start to understand something fundamental. This place needs people who know, people who remember, people who can read the signs before another accident happens. I've kept a journal since my first week, not like Clive's notebook. He tracks the deaths, the incidents, the patterns. My journal is different. I document everything that happens here, every strange occurrence, every unexplained phenomenon. I've filled 14 notebooks so far, and I keep them all locked in a safe deposit box at the bank across the street. If something happens to me, my sister has instructions to publish them. Let the world know what's really going on here. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the day I realized this job was never going to be normal. It was a Tuesday morning in April, about 6 years ago. I'd been working here for 8 months, and I thought I'd seen everything. The flickering lights, the cold spots, the inventory that seemed to rearrange itself overnight. I'd written it all off as an old building with bad wiring and employees who didn't put things back where they belonged. Then I met Sarah Kimball. She was a new hire, young, enthusiastic, the kind of person who actually smiled while restocking shelves. Mrs. Hargrove had assigned her to the frozen food section, and I was supposed to train her. We were in the walk-in freezer, and I was showing her how to rotate stock, old product to the front, new to the back. It was around 10 a.m., plenty of daylight, plenty of other employees in the store. Safe as houses, or so I thought. Sarah was chatting away about her plans to save up for culinary school when I noticed the temperature drop. I mean, really drop. We were already in a freezer, but suddenly I could see my breath crystallizing in the air and frost started forming on my eyebrows. "Is it always this cold?" Sarah asked, wrapping her arms around herself. "No, we need to leave, now." But when I turned toward the door, it was closed. I knew I'd left it propped open. That's the rule. Always prop the freezer door when you're working inside. But now it was sealed shut. I grabbed the emergency release handle and pulled. Nothing happened. Sarah's smile was gone now. "What's wrong with the door?" "It's stuck. Help me with it." We both pulled, throwing our full weight into it, but the door wouldn't budge. It was like something on the other side was holding it closed. That's when we heard the voice. It came from the back of the freezer, from between the pallets of frozen dinners and ice cream. "So cold. Why is it so cold?" Sarah grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "There's someone else in here." "No," I whispered. "There isn't." But I could see him now, forming out of the frost and shadows. A teenage boy in a Hargrove Market vest, his lips blue, ice crystals in his hair and eyelashes. He looked solid enough to touch, but I could see the boxes of frozen vegetables through his chest. "I can't feel my fingers," he said, holding up his hands. They were black with frostbite. "Mom's gonna be mad I'm late getting home." "Oh, God," Sarah whimpered. "Oh, God, oh, God, oh, God." "Sarah, listen to me." I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was trying to punch through my ribs. "Do not panic. We're going to be fine." The ghost boy drifted closer. "Do you know the way out? I've been looking for the door, but everything looks as the same." The temperature was still dropping. I could feel ice forming in my lungs every time I breathed. We had maybe 5 minutes before hypothermia became a real problem, maybe 10 before we ended up like the ghost boy. "What's your name?" I asked him. Sarah stared at me like I'd lost my mind. What's your name?" I asked again, louder. The boy tilted his head, confused. Daniel Porter. I work here. This is my 3rd week." "Daniel, I need you to help us. We need to get out of the freezer, but the door is stuck. Can you help us open it?" He looked at the door, then back at me. "The door? But I can't find the door. That's why I'm still here." And that's when I understood. He'd been trapped in here, frozen to death, and his ghost was stuck in the same moment of confusion and fear, unable to find the exit, even though it was right in front of him. "Daniel, I'm going to show you where the door is, but I need you to trust me, okay?" Sarah's teeth were chattering so hard she couldn't speak. Her lips were turning blue. We were running out of time. I walked toward the door, and Daniel followed me. When I touched the handle, I felt resistance, not physical exactly, but like pushing against a strong wind. Daniel's ghost was somehow keeping it sealed, replaying the moment of his death over and over. "Daniel, this is the door. This is how you get out. Do you see it?" He stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, understanding flickered across his frozen features. The door was sat here. I was turned around. Everything looked so white. "Yes, and now you can leave. You can go home." "Home?" His voice cracked. "Mom's waiting. She's going to be worried." "Then you should go to her." Daniel looked at me one more time, and for a second, his face cleared. The frost melted from his skin, and he looked like a regular teenage boy again, not a frozen corpse. "Thank you." Then he was gone. just dissolved into nothing, and suddenly the door was easy to push open. Sarah and I stumbled out of the freezer and collapsed on the floor of the frozen food aisle. My fingers were numb, my face felt like someone had slapped it repeatedly, and I was shaking so hard my teeth rattled. But we were alive. Clive appeared above us, looking unsurprised. He had a blanket for each of us and 2 cups of hot coffee. "Daniel Porter," he said. Not a question. I nodded. "Happened in 1972. Winter storm knocked out the power, and Daniel went into the freezer to check the inventory. Door sealed behind him. They didn't find him until 3 days later." Clive helped Sarah to her feet. "He's been stuck in there ever since, reliving it. You helped him move on. That's good. That's real good." Sarah quit that afternoon. Didn't even finish her shift. Last I heard, she moved to California and refuses to go into any walk-in freezers, even at restaurants. But I stayed, and I started taking this place seriously. That was my first real encounter, but it was far from the last. I learned that Hargrove Market isn't just haunted, it's actively dangerous. The ghosts here aren't all like Daniel, confused and harmless. Some of them are angry, some of them are malicious, and some of them are something else entirely. Take the woman in aisle 7, for instance. Her name was Patricia Vance, according to Clive's records. She worked here in the 1960s as a cashier. One day, she got into an argument with a customer who accused her of shortchanging him. The man grabbed her by the throat, strangled her right there at the register while a line of people watched. He claimed he blacked out, didn't remember doing it. Got off with manslaughter, served 3 years. Patricia's ghost doesn't just haunt, she retaliates. If a customer is rude to one of our cashiers, really rude, not just having a bad day but genuinely cruel, Patricia shows up. She manifests in aisle 7, and when the rude customer walks past, their shopping cart will suddenly veer off course. They'll trip over nothing. Products will fall off the shelves and hit them. Usually it's minor. Annoying, maybe a bit scary, but harmless. Sometimes, though, it's worse. 2 years ago, a man came in and verbally abused one of our teenage baggers. Called her every name in the book, made her cry, threatened to get her fired over some imagined slight. Management couldn't do anything. The customer is always right and all that corporate bullshit. But Patricia could do something. The man was found an hour later in the parking lot. He'd somehow gotten his head stuck in the car window and broken his neck trying to pull free. Security footage showed him walking to his car normally, then suddenly jerking to the left, slamming his head through the partially open window and falling in a way that twisted his spine into an unnatural angle. The police ruled it an accident, a tragic, bizarre accident. Clive and I knew better. After that, I started paying more attention to which employees were targeted by the ghosts, because that's what they do. They target specific people, and I realized there's a pattern. The angry ghosts, the ones who hurt people, they go after anyone who reminds them of their killer or the person who wronged them. Patricia attacks rude customers because they remind her of the man who strangled her. Thomas Granger appears to employees who take shortcuts or ignore safety procedures because that's what got him killed. But the pit walker? That thing doesn't discriminate. It hates everyone equally. I first encountered it 3 years ago. Mrs. Hargrove had asked me to do a late-night inventory in the basement. I argued. I'd heard the stories, knew the basement was dangerous after dark. But she insisted, said the quarterly inspection was coming up, and we needed accurate counts. She gave me the key, a flashlight, because of course the basement lighting is terrible, and one warning: stay away from the south wall. Don't touch it, don't look at it too long, and for God's sake, don't read the writing out loud. I went down there at 11 p.m. after the store closed. The basement was just as cold and oppressive as I'd imagined. The air felt thick, like breathing through wet cloth, and every sound echoed wrong, too long, too distorted. I started counting boxes, writing everything down in my notebook, trying to work fast, trying not to think about where I was. That lasted about 20 minutes. Then I felt it. A presence. Not one of the human ghosts. They feel sad or angry or confused, but still fundamentally human. This was something else, something old and vast and utterly alien. It was watching me from the south wall. I'd been careful not to look directly at it, but now I couldn't help myself. I turned, and even in the dim light, I could see the carved symbols moving, actually moving, writhing like worms under the concrete. And there, in the center of the wall, something was pushing through. Not breaking through, the ward was holding, barely, but pressing against it from the other side. I could see the concrete bulging inward, see cracks forming around the edges of the symbols. And through those cracks, I could see something that made my brain hurt to process. Darkness. But not empty darkness. Darkness that was alive, that had texture and depth and hunger. Darkness that wanted out. A voice spoke directly into my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. Free me. It wasn't a request. It was a command, loaded with so much power that I felt my legs start moving toward the wall without conscious decision. My hand reached out, fingers extended to touch those moving symbols. Mira, no! Clive crashed into me from the side, knocking me away from the wall. We hit the ground hard, and I felt my clipboard skid away into the darkness. Don't listen to it, Clive gasped. Don't look at it. Come on, we need to go. Now! He dragged me toward the stairs, and I let him because I could still hear that voice in my head. Free me. Break the ward. Let me out. Free me. Free me. Free me. We made it to the top of the stairs, and Clive slammed the door shut, turning all 3 locks with shaking hands. What the hell was that? I demanded. That was why I've worked here for 43 years. That was why Mrs. Hargrove can't sell this place, even if she wanted to. That was why we stay, Mira. Because if that thing ever gets out... He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I could still feel it, even through the locked door and the walls in the distance. I could feel it pressing against the ward, testing it, looking for weaknesses. And it was getting stronger. That was 3 years ago. Since then, I've been down to the basement 6 more times. Each time, the presence is more active. The cracks in the wall are wider. The symbols are fading, like old ink exposed to sunlight. Mrs. Hargrove does maintenance on the ward every few months, reinforcing the symbols, adding new ones. She won't tell me what she's using to paint them, but I have suspicions. Bad ones. The last time I went down there 2 months ago, I saw something that made my blood run cold. One of the symbols had been broken. Not cracked. Broken completely through, leaving a hole about the size of a quarter in the concrete. Through that hole I could see an eye. Not a human eye, something larger, darker, with a pupil that was the wrong shape. It swiveled to look at me, and I heard that voice again. Soon. I ran back upstairs and told Mrs. Hargrove immediately. She went down there with her painting supplies and didn't come back up for 4 hours. When she did, she looked 10 years older. It's getting worse, she said simply. How much longer? Until the ward fails completely? 6 months, maybe a year if we're lucky. And then what happens? She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. Then we find out why my grandfather was so desperate to keep it contained, and God help us all when we do. That was 2 months ago. We've had 4 deaths since then. 4 accidents in 8 weeks. Which is unheard of even for Hargrove Market. A cashier who slipped and cracked her skull on the register. A customer who had a heart attack in the canned goods aisle, even though the autopsy showed his heart was perfectly healthy. A delivery driver who was crushed when a pallet fell off a forklift that nobody was operating. And then there was Jessica. Jessica Ramos was one of our best employees. Smart, hardworking, never complained. She'd worked here for 2 years and knew all the rules, respected them. But the pit walker got her anyway. It happened last week. Jessica was closing the store, doing the final walkthrough before locking up. Security footage shows her moving through the aisles normally, checking that everything was secure. Then she stopped in aisle 7. Just stood there, completely still, for 3 minutes. When she started moving again, she wasn't walking toward the exit. She was walking toward the basement door. The door that's kept triple locked. The door that only Mrs. Hargrove, Clive, and I have keys to. Somehow, all 3 locks were open. Jessica walked down into the basement, and the door closed behind her. Clive found her body the next morning when he opened the store. She was lying on the floor in front of the south wall, and her eyes had been burned out. Not with fire, with cold. Frozen solid, like she'd stared directly at something so cold it bypassed flesh and froze her brain. And on the wall above her, written in what I desperately hope was just paint, were 3 words: 1 more month. We called the police, of course. Told them Jessica must have had a key we didn't know about. Must have gone down there to get supplies and had some kind of medical episode. They bought it. Why wouldn't they? Just another tragic accident at Hargrove Market. But I know the truth. The pit walker is growing stronger. It's not content to just whisper anymore, to just push against the ward. It's actively reaching out, claiming victims, proving it can. And in 1 month, maybe less, that ward is going to fail completely. Mrs. Hargrove is trying to find someone who can reinforce it, someone with the knowledge to make the binding hold. But that kind of expertise is rare. The man her grandfather hired in 1940 is long dead, and he didn't leave instructions. We're working from guesswork and desperate hope. Meanwhile, I keep coming to work. Keep training new employees and warning them about the rules. Keep documenting everything in my journals, because that's all I can do. That's all any of us can do. We're wardens of something that should never have been disturbed. And when it breaks free, not if, when, I want there to be a record. I want people to know what was here, what we tried to do. I want them to know we didn't just ignore it. We fought, even knowing we'd probably lose. My name is Mira Lancaster. I'm the day shift supervisor at Hargrove Market. And I'm probably going to die here, but at least I'll die knowing I tried to protect people. That has to count for something. Clive Morrison, Senior Stock Manager. 43 years. That's how long I've been at Hargrove Market. Longer than anyone alive, longer than anyone should be, and probably longer than I'll last once I finish telling you what I know. My name is Clive Morrison, and I'm the last person who remembers what this place was like before it went completely wrong. I was here when the ward was strong. I was here when the dead were quiet. And I'm going to be here when it all ends. I started working at Hargrove Market in 1980. I was 22 years old, fresh out of the army, looking for something simple and steady. The pay was good, the work was straightforward, and old Mr. Hargrove, that's Mrs. Hargrove's father, seemed like a decent boss. He hired me on a Tuesday. On Friday, I saw my first ghost. Her name was Catherine Mills. Died in 1955 when a shelf collapsed and crushed her. She appears every few months in aisle 3, browsing the soup like nothing ever happened. She's harmless, just an echo of who she used to be. Mr. Hargrove saw me staring and pulled me aside. "You can see them," he said. Not a question. See what? The dead. Not everyone can. Most people, their brains just filter it out, convince them they're seeing shadows or tricks of the light. But some people like you and me, we see them clear as day. He took me down to the basement that afternoon and showed me the wall, told me everything, the mass grave, the factory fire, the binding his father had created to keep the dead contained. They're not evil, he explained, just confused, angry, trapped. The ward keeps them from getting too agitated, keeps them from hurting people. But it requires maintenance, requires someone who knows what they're looking for. And you want me to help maintain it? No. I want you to learn how, so when I'm gone, someone can keep this place safe. He put a hand on my shoulder. I'm 67 years old, Clive. I won't be here forever. But the dead? They'll be here long after I'm dust. Someone needs to watch over them. Someone needs to remember. So, I learned. Spent the next 15 years learning everything Mr. Hargrove could teach me about the ward, about the ghosts, about the thing in the wall that was older and darker than all the human dead combined. The Pit Walker, we called it. Though that's not its real name, it doesn't have a name that human mouths can pronounce. Mr. Hargrove's father had encountered it when he was digging the foundation in 1933. Hit something that shouldn't have been there, not the mass grave, they found that later. Something deeper. Something that had been sealed away long before white men ever came to this continent. The native peoples who lived here before us, they knew about it. Had their own wards, their own bindings. But when they were driven out, forced west, those wards broke. And the thing underneath started to wake up. Mr. Hargrove's father didn't understand what he'd found. Not at first. Just thought it was an old cave, maybe some kind of natural formation. He had his workers fill it in, build over it, forget about it. The first death happened 6 days after the market opened. By the end of the first year, 7 employees were dead. All accidents, all inexplicable. That's when Mr. Hargrove's father sought help. Found a drifter who claimed to know the old ways, who said he could bind what had been released. The ward was created, painted in blood and ash, and things I don't want to know about. And it worked. For 80 years it worked. But nothing lasts forever. Mr. Hargrove died in 1995. Heart attack, peaceful, at home. He left the market to his daughter with one instruction: maintain the ward, no matter what. Mrs. Hargrove tried. She really did. But she didn't have her father's gift, didn't have his knowledge. She maintained the ward as best she could, but every year it got a little weaker. Every year the dead got a little more active. Every year the pit walker pushed a little harder, and now we're here, the ward failing, the dead restless, the pit walker nearly free. I've kept records of every incident, every death, every paranormal occurrence for 43 years. My notebook is almost full. I started a new one last week, but I don't think I'll need to finish it, because in 3 weeks, maybe 4, the ward is gonna break. And when it does, this market, maybe this whole town, is gonna learn what real horror looks like. I've seen what the pit walker can do when it's contained, when it's just pressing against the ward. It can reach into people's minds, control their actions, make them see things that aren't there. It feeds on fear and death, grows stronger with every life it claims. When it breaks free, when it has unlimited access to the living. I don't think any of us are prepared for that. Mrs. Hargrove has contacted every expert she can find, occultists, spiritual mediums, religious leaders from a dozen different faiths. Most of them won't come near the place once they learn what we're dealing with. The few that do come take one look at the ward and leave. One old woman, some kind of indigenous shaman from out west, stood in the basement for exactly 45 seconds before turning and walking out. I followed her. "Can you help us?" I asked. She shook her head. "That thing was sealed away for a reason. My people knew what it was, knew it couldn't be killed, only contained. Your ward was never going to hold forever. It was a bandage on a severed artery. The best you could hope for was to buy time. How much time do we have?" She looked back at the market, and I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "Not enough. I'm sorry." She left. We haven't heard from her since. So now it's just us, Mrs. Hargrove, Mira, Ethan, and me. The only people who know the full truth. The only people who might be able to do something. Might. Last night I stayed late after everyone else went home. I took my notebook and went down to the basement one last time. I wanted to document the ward's current state, to record how far it had deteriorated. The cracks had spread. The hole that Mira saw 2 months ago was now the size of a dinner plate. Through it, I could see darkness moving, swirling, filled with shapes that hurt to look at. And I could hear voices. Not just the pitwalker's voice. I'd heard that before, heard its commands and threats. These were different voices, human voices, screaming, the 37 people from the mass grave. I realized the pitwalker had them, had been feeding on them for 90 years, keeping them trapped in torment, using their suffering to sustain itself. And when it broke free, it would be stronger than ever. I stood there in that basement, looking at the failing ward, listening to the screams of the long dead, and I made a decision. I can't fix the ward. I don't have the knowledge or the power. But maybe I can give us more time. Maybe I can slow the pitwalker down. The ward was created with blood and ash, with sacrifice and binding. Maybe it can be reinforced the same way. I pulled out my pocket knife and cut deep into my palm. Blood welled up, dark in the dim light. I pressed my hand against the wall, against the symbols, and I spoke the words Mr. Hargrove had taught me all those years ago. Words in a language I don't understand, words that make my throat hurt and my eyes water, words that should never be spoken but sometimes must be. The symbols began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter. My hand burned where it touched the wall, burned cold like frostbite, and I felt something pulling at me, pulling at my life, my energy, my years. The pitwalker screamed, not out loud. It had no voice in our world yet. But in my mind, a shriek of rage that nearly made me pass out. I held on, kept speaking the words, kept bleeding onto the wall. And slowly, the cracks began to seal. The hole grew smaller. The darkness retreated. Just a little. When I finally pulled away, my hand was gray and withered, like it had aged 50 years in 50 seconds. But the ward was stronger. Not fixed, but stronger. I'd bought us time, maybe a month, maybe 2. But I'd also drawn the pitwalker's full attention. It knew who I was now, knew what I'd done, and it was not pleased. I made it back upstairs and bandaged my hand as best I could. Didn't go to a hospital. How do you explain a hand that looks like it belongs to a corpse? Told everyone I'd burned it on the coffee maker. Nobody questioned it. That was 3 days ago. My hand hasn't healed. If anything, it's worse. The gray has spread up my arm to my elbow. I can barely move my fingers, and the cold is seeping deeper into my bones, into my chest. I'm dying. I know that. Whatever I did down there, it's killing me. But I'd do it again, because that reinforcement bought time for Mrs. Hargrove to find help. Bought time for Ethan and Mira to warn the new employees. Bought time for innocent people to stay alive a little longer. That's what we do here at Hargrove Market. We buy time. We hold the line. We protect people who don't even know they need protecting. And when that line finally breaks, when the ward fails and the pitwalker breaks free, I hope someone remembers that we tried. We fought as hard as we could. My name is Clive Morrison. I've worked at Hargrove Market for 43 years. I've seen things that would break most people's minds. I've kept the dead at bay and held back darkness that predates human civilization. And in a few weeks, I'm gonna die. But I'm not afraid, because I know that Ethan and Mira will carry on. They'll keep fighting, keep warning, keep trying to protect people, and maybe, just maybe, they'll find a way to fix what my generation couldn't. If you're reading this, if someone published my notebook after I'm gone, take it as a warning. There are places in this world that should be left alone, doors that should stay closed, things that should remain bound. Hargrove Market is one of those places. Don't apply for a job there. Don't shop there if you can help it. And if you absolutely must go, follow the rules. Listen to the employees who've been there longest. Respect what you don't understand. Because the alternative is becoming another name in my notebook. Another incident. Another death that will be ruled an accident when we all know better. The market is hungry. It's always been hungry, and it's running out of patience. God help us all when it finally breaks free. Margaret Hargrove, owner. My name is Margaret Hargrove, and I'm the third generation of my family to own this cursed place. Some days I wonder if ownership is the right word. Perhaps prisoner would be more accurate. I inherited Hargrove Market from my father in 1995, along with a responsibility I didn't fully understand until it was too late to walk away. He died believing I could maintain what he and my grandfather had built. Not just a business, but a containment facility for something that should never have been disturbed. I was wrong. He was wrong. And now we're all paying the price. Let me tell you something that Clive and Mira and Ethan don't know. Something I've kept hidden for 28 years. I'm not the first Margaret Hargrove to run this market. My grandmother had the same name. She ran it from 1947 to 1963. She killed herself in the office upstairs. They found her hanging from the light fixture, a rope made from twisted apron strings around her neck. My father was 17 years old when he found her. He never spoke about it, never explained what drove her to it. Just quietly cut her down, called the police, and told them she'd been depressed. But I found her journal 3 years ago, hidden in a false bottom of the desk drawer in that same office. And what I read there changed everything I thought I knew about this place. My grandmother knew the ward was temporary. She'd known since 1952 when she first noticed the symbols beginning to fade. She tried everything to reinforce it, brought in priests, shamans, occultists, anyone who claimed they could help. Some tried. Most failed. A few never left the basement alive. And slowly, month by month, year by year, she watched the ward weaken and the dead grow stronger. The final entry in her journal dated the morning of her death. It spoke to me last night. Not through the wall, through my daughter. I came downstairs for a glass of water and found little Margaret standing in the kitchen, facing the basement door. She was 8 years old. She was asleep, and when I tried to wake her, she turned to me with eyes that were completely black and said in a voice that wasn't hers, "The ward breaks when she comes of age. Your bloodline opened the door. Your bloodline will watch it swing wide." I understand now. This was never about containing it. It was about delaying it. My father-in-law didn't seal the pit walker away. He just chained it to our family. And when the chain breaks, when the ward finally fails, it will be a Hargrove who bears witness. I can't let Margaret grow up with this burden. I can't let her become what I've become. A warden of the damned, slowly going mad from the whispers and the nightmares, and the knowledge that everything I do is ultimately futile. I'm sorry, my darling girl. I'm so sorry. But this is the only way I know to protect you. She was wrong, of course. Her death didn't break the chain. I still inherited the market, still became the warden. All she did was leave my father alone with the horror, leave him without guidance or support. I've spent 28 years trying not to make her mistake, trying to be strong enough to bear this burden so my children never have to. I don't have children. That was a deliberate choice. The bloodline ends with me. And maybe, just maybe, that will make a difference when the ward finally breaks. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the last 6 months, about how bad things have really gotten. Clive thinks he bought us a month with his sacrifice. He's right. The ward is stronger than it was. But what he doesn't know is the cost of that reinforcement. He thinks he's dying from the ward draining his life force. He's not. The pit walker is eating him from the inside out. When Clive pressed his bleeding hand to the wall and spoke those binding words, he didn't just reinforce the ward. He opened a connection, made himself a conduit. And now the pit walker is using that connection to feed, to grow stronger, to prepare for its emergence. Clive has maybe 2 weeks left. After that, the gray decay will reach his heart, and he'll die. And when he dies, the connection will break, the reinforcement will fail, and the ward will shatter. I should tell him, should warn him, but what good would it do? He made his choice knowing it would kill him. Learning the specifics won't change anything. Instead, I've been using these last weeks to prepare, to plan for what comes after. The pit walker can't be killed. My grandmother's research made that clear, and everything I've learned since has confirmed it. It's not a demon or ghost or anything that exists in a framework we understand. It's something older, something that existed before human concepts of life and death. But it can be rebound, resealed, put back in its prison. The question is, what price am I willing to pay to do that? My grandmother's journal contained fragments of the original binding ritual, the one my grandfather's father commissioned in 1940. The drifter who created it, a man named Samuel Birch, though I suspect that wasn't his real name, he knew what he was doing. The ritual worked for 80 years, but it required 3 things: blood, knowledge, and sacrifice. Blood? He used his own, painting the symbols over the course of 3 nights. By the 3rd night, he could barely stand. He left town the next day and died 2 weeks later in a boarding house in Pennsylvania. Massive internal hemorrhaging, the death certificate said. Knowledge. He knew the old words, the binding languages that predate Sanskrit and Sumerian. Words that humans aren't meant to speak because our mouths and throats and minds aren't built for them. Speaking them damages you, tears something fundamental inside. Sacrifice. This is the part my grandmother's journal was vague about. Samuel Birch provided the blood and knowledge, but someone else provided the sacrifice. Someone who went down into the basement before the ward was complete and never came back up. My great-grandfather's business partner, a man named Thomas Killian. There are no records of what happened to Thomas Killian. He simply disappeared from history in June 1940, the same month the ward was completed, and no one in my family ever spoke about him. But I found something 3 months ago that explained everything. There's a crawl space behind the wall in the basement. I only discovered it because a section of the concrete crumbled away, revealing a gap barely 2 feet high. I grabbed a flashlight and squeezed through, not sure what I'd find. What I found was Thomas Killian, or what was left of him. He was mummified, desiccated, wrapped in chains that had been painted with the same symbols as the ward, and he was positioned directly behind where the pit walker pushed against the wall. The chains ran through his body, through his chest, his stomach, his skull, and into the concrete on all sides. He wasn't just a sacrifice. He was an anchor, a living seal that bound the pit walker in place. And I realized what I would have to do. If I want to reseal the pit walker, if I want to buy another 80 years of safety, I need all 3 components: blood, knowledge, and sacrifice. I can provide the blood. I've been preparing for months, taking iron supplements, building up my reserves. It will kill me, but it will work. The knowledge is harder. I've collected every book, every scroll, every fragment of text I could find that mentions binding rituals or elder entities. I've spent 6 months learning to pronounce words that make my throat bleed and my eyes water. I'm not as skilled as Samuel Birch was, but I know enough. I hope it's enough. But the sacrifice, that's the problem I can't solve. The ritual requires a willing participant. Someone who understands what they're agreeing to and accepts it anyway. Someone who will allow themselves to be chained behind that wall, to become the living anchor that holds the pit walker in place. Someone who will spend whatever remains of their life in darkness and agony, slowly being consumed by the very thing they're restraining. I can't ask that of anyone. I won't. Even if someone was willing And who would be? I don't have the right to condemn them to that fate. So I've been searching for an alternative, trying to find a way to modify the ritual, to use a different kind of anchor, anything that doesn't require human sacrifice. I've failed. Every expert I've consulted says the same thing. The ritual needs all three components. Without a living anchor, the binding won't hold. And then, 2 days ago, Clive came to my office. He looked terrible. The gray decay had spread to his shoulder, his neck. He moved like every step caused pain, but his eyes were clear and determined. "I know what needs to be done," he said. "Clive, you need to rest. Don't patronize me, Margaret. I've been doing research. I found Samuel Birch's journal in the Historical Society archives. I know about Thomas Killian. I know what the ritual requires." My blood ran cold. "How did you—" "I'm not stupid. I've worked here for 43 years. I've seen the patterns, read the signs, and I know you've been preparing something." He sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk. "I'm dying anyway. The pitwalker's already inside me, eating me from the inside out. I can feel it. I was going to tell you, no, you weren't. You were going to let me die thinking I'd bought you time, that my sacrifice mattered." He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "And you were right to. If I'd known the truth, I might not have done it. But now that it's done, now that I'm already dead, I can finish what I started. Clive, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering. I'll be your anchor. I'll be the sacrifice the ritual needs." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him no, that I'd find another way. But I couldn't lie to him, not after everything he'd done, everything he'd sacrificed. "It will be agony," I said softly. "Thomas Killian's remains, the expression on his face. He died screaming, Clive, and it took him years to die." "I know, but if I don't do this, how many other people will die when the pitwalker breaks free? How many Ethans and Miras and innocent customers will be consumed because I was too scared to finish what I started?" He leaned forward, and I saw the determination in his eyes, the acceptance. "I've been keeping records for 43 years, Margaret, writing down every death, every incident, every victim. 73 names in my notebook, 73 people who died because this place exists, because the pitwalker exists. I won't let that number keep growing, not if I can stop it." We sat in silence for a long moment. Then I nodded. "When?" he asked. 3 days. I need to finish preparing the ritual components, and I need to wait until the ward is at its weakest point. The new binding will be strongest if it's created right as the old one fails." 3 days. Clive stood, moving carefully. "That gives me time to update my notebook, to write down what really happened. I don't want anyone thinking I just died from some mysterious illness. Clive, and I want you to give the notebook to Ethan. He deserves to know the full story, deserves to understand why we do what we do." I promised I would. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Margaret, thank you for trying to find another way. Thank you for not asking me to do this. It makes it easier somehow, knowing it's my choice." Then he was gone. That was 2 days ago. Tomorrow night, when the store closes, I'll perform the ritual. Clive will go into the basement one last time, and I'll seal him behind that wall, chain him in place, bind him to the pitwalker. I'll speak the words that will tear my throat bloody and burn through my veins like acid. I'll paint the symbols in my own blood until I have nothing left to give. And if I'm lucky, if I've prepared enough, if I've learned enough, the binding will hold. For another 80 years, maybe more, but probably not forever. Because the truth is, no binding lasts forever. Eventually, my grandmother's prophecy will come true. The pitwalker will break free. It's not a matter of if, only when. And when it does, I hope someone has the courage to do what needs to be done, to make the sacrifice, to pay the price, to seal it away one more time. That's the burden of the Hargrove bloodline. Not ownership of this market, but stewardship of this prison. Guardian of the gate. It's a burden I've carried for 28 years, a burden that's driven 3 generations of my family to despair and death. But it's a burden I'll carry for 3 more days, and then Clive will carry it for me. God forgive us both. Margaret Hargrove. It's done. The ritual took 6 hours. 6 hours of speaking words that shouldn't be spoken, painting symbols in blood that poured from cuts I made in my arms, my legs, my stomach. By the 3rd hour, I couldn't stand without support. By the 5th, I couldn't see clearly. My eyes were full of blood, but I kept going, kept chanting, kept painting. Clive was magnificent. He didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't try to run, just stood there as I wrapped the chains around him, threw him, binding him to the wall. The pain must have been unimaginable, but he only gasped once when the first chain pierced his chest. "Keep going," he whispered. "Don't stop." When the chains were in place, when the symbols were complete, I spoke the final words of binding, words that made my tongue split and my throat fill with blood, and the pit walker screamed, not with sound, with force, with rage. The entire basement shook, and I felt its fury crashing against the new ward, testing it, trying to break through. But the ward held. The chains glowed white-hot for a moment, and Clive screamed, finally screamed, as the binding locked into place. Then, silence. I collapsed against the wall, barely conscious, bleeding from more places than I could count. Clive was still alive, still breathing, but his eyes had changed. They were distant now, focused on something I couldn't see. "It's so cold," he whispered. "So dark. But I can hold it. I can hold it for a long time." "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be. This is what wardens do. We hold the line." I crawled to the stairs, left him there in the darkness, left him chained and suffering and alone. The paramedics found me at the top of the basement stairs at 6 a.m. when the day shift arrived. "Severe blood loss," they said. "Lucky to be alive." I told them I'd fallen, cut myself on broken glass. They didn't question it. I've been in the hospital for 3 days now. They say I can go home tomorrow, but I won't be going home. I'll be going back to the market. Because the ward is holding, yes, but it needs maintenance, needs care, needs someone who knows what they're watching over. And now that Clive is gone, not dead, but worse than dead, I'm the only one left who truly understands. Ethan and Mira suspect. They're smart, observant, but they don't know the full truth. And maybe that's for the best. Clive's notebook is in my safe. I'll give it to Ethan like I promised. Let him read the full history, understand the scope of what we're dealing with. And maybe, just maybe, he'll be strong enough to carry this burden when I'm gone. Because I won't live another 28 years. The ritual took too much from me. The doctors don't understand why my blood won't clot properly, why I'm healing so slowly. But I know. The ward is bound to my blood now, sustained by it. Every day it drains a little more from me. In a year, maybe 2, I'll be as gray and withered as Clive was. And then someone else will have to take over. Someone else will have to maintain the ward, protect the innocent, hold back the darkness. God help whoever that is.